Locked door, silent killer. The unsolved murder of Vicki Sicurella. Inside the 1991 Hamilton homicide that stunned a community, shattered a family, and remains unsolved over 3 decades later. She was a devoted mother. Her home was locked. The killer vanished. Who murdered Vicki Sicurella? And why is no one being held accountable? It was a cold Monday in early December, 1991. The kind of day where the sky hangs low and the air carries a scent of snow. In a quiet Hamilton townhouse, the groceries had just been unpacked. The television was off, the radio silent. And behind a locked front door, a young mother lay dead in her kitchen. 32-year-old Vicki Sicurella had spent her day doing what she always did, looking after her 7-year-old son Brad, a boy with special needs who relied on her completely. She'd gone to the store. She planned dinner. She was supposed to meet Brad after school. But that day, she never showed up. And when a concerned friend arrived at the home to check on her, the door was locked. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no struggle visible from the outside. Inside, Vicki being stabbed to death. The weapon was left behind, but the killer had vanished. The case would shock Hamilton to its core, not just because of its brutality, but because of the silence that followed. No one arrested, no one charged. And yet detectives believed then, and believe now, that Vicki knew her killer. Someone she trusted. Someone who walked through her front door and left behind a locked mystery. Tonight on Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast, we investigate a haunting question that's lingered for over 3 decades. Who killed Vicki Sicurella? Why is no one being held accountable? And could the answer still be sitting in a file, just waiting to be found? This is Locked Door, Silent Killer, the unsolved murder of Vicki Sicurella. Stay with us. Hello, I'm Jay Nichol, Nichol Investigations. And this is Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. Ontario Cold Cases is a gripping true crime podcast that shines a light on unsolved murders, disappearances, and forgotten crimes from across the province and the world. With meticulous research, compelling storytelling, and a commitment to historical accuracy, we bring you the real stories of victims, investigators, and suspects, stories that demand to be heard. Each week, we take you deep into the world of true crime with a packed schedule of episodes. Tuesdays, historical true crime cases, exploring infamous and obscure crimes from history. Wednesdays, the Mick and Mac Mysteries, a thrilling fictional detective series set in 1950s Toronto. Thursdays, World Cold Case Thursday, investigating unsolved cases from around the globe. Sundays, Ontario Cold Cases, the latest episode uncovering an unsolved mystery from Ontario. From high-profile crimes that shock the nation to little-known cases waiting for justice, we uncover the truth, one case at a time. Join us as we explore the dark corners of history and mystery, where every clue could lead to answers and every case deserves a second look. Subscribe now wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts and never miss an episode of Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. Crime scene and initial discovery. On December 2nd, 1991, 32-year-old Vicki Sicurella was found brutally murdered inside her townhouse on Lime Ridge Road West in Hamilton, Ontario. She'd been grocery shopping earlier that afternoon, but inexplicably failed to pick up her 7-year-old son Brad from school, an immediate red flag to those who knew her routine. A concerned friend, some sources say a neighbor, went to check on Vicki when she didn't show up. And around dinner time, this friend discovered Vicki's lifeless body in the kitchen. Vicki had been stabbed to death. The scene that greeted investigators was both shocking and puzzling. Notably, the townhouse was locked when the friend arrived, and there were no obvious signs of forced entry. The killer appeared to have locked the door upon leaving, suggesting they took care to delay discovery or create the illusion that nothing was amiss. Inside the murder weapon, a knife, was recovered at the scene. Nothing in the home was stolen or disturbed. There were no indications of a break-in or robbery gone wrong. This immediately led police to believe that the attack was targeted and not a random incident. As one detective later noted, the murder likely occurred in a short afternoon time frame by someone the victim knew and trusted enough to let inside. The victim's life and background. Vicki Sicurella was a devoted mother and a beloved member of her community. At the time of her death, she was a single mother, recently divorced about 3 years earlier from her husband, Sam Sicurella. Friends and family described Sam as a devoted father who maintained a good relationship with Vicki despite their split. In fact, investigators found no animosity between the ex-spouses. Sam was cooperative and is not considered a suspect in her murder. Much of Vicki's life revolved around caring for her young son Brad, who had a rare genetic condition known as Prader-Willi syndrome. Due to his special needs, Brad required consistent routines. He was driven to and from school each day by a transport service, which is why it was immediately alarming when Vicki was not at home to receive him that afternoon. Vicki's dedication to her son was well known. As one account noted, she devoted her life to her then 7-year-old son, who had a rare birth defect. Her sudden violent death meant that Brad was not only left without his mother, but he was also the unwitting witness to a deeply traumatic scene. Arriving home to find the door locked and his mother unresponsive inside. The driver ultimately had to take the child back to school when no one answered the door. This heartbreaking circumstance underscored the cruelty of the crime and galvanized the community's desire to see justice served. Up next, the police investigation and early leads. The police investigation and early leads. Hamilton police launched an intensive investigation into Vicki Sicurella's murder. Early on, detectives zeroed in on the fact there was no forced entry and no apparent theft, indicating the perpetrator was likely someone Vicki knew personally. This theory was bolstered by the locked door scenario. Seeing the killer had a level of familiarity or comfort in the home. Police have long maintained the single mother knew her killer, reported one account of the case. Investigators canvassed the neighborhood and interviewed Vicki's family, friends, and acquaintances to piece together her final hours. They confirmed that Vicki was last seen alive around 3:30 p.m. on December 2nd, when a friend dropped her off at a local grocery store. After buying groceries, she walked home to her townhouse. The window of time between her return home and the friend's discovery of her body was narrow, likely just an hour or two, giving the investigation a tight timeline to work with. One early lead that emerged was rumors of a recent affair in Vicki's personal life. According to information relayed to police, Vicki had allegedly been involved in a romantic relationship with a married man, and she had ended this affair shortly before her death. This detail, though not officially confirmed by family at the time, raised obvious questions about motive. Could a jilted lover or a jealous spouse have been involved in her murder? The affair rumor became a focal point for detectives who quietly investigated individuals connected to Vicki's love life. Given the sensitive nature, police did not publicly name any suspect from this lead, but it informed their line of inquiry. Years later, journalists would highlight this angle, noting an affair with a married man as a tantalizing clue in the otherwise mysterious crime. Throughout the initial investigation, Vicki's ex-husband Sam and her close family were cooperative and by all accounts devastated. Police found no evidence implicating the ex-husband, who had an alibi and no motive. By contrast, the theory that someone from Vicki's more private personal life might be responsible began to gain traction. Forensic evidence from the scene, including the knife and any biological traces, was collected in 1991. But at the time, DNA profiling was in its infancy. Investigators did what they could with the technology available, preserving the evidence in hope that future advancements might yield answers. Despite extensive interviews and some promising leads, no arrest was made in the early phase of the investigation. The case gradually grew cold as 1991 turned into 1992 with no breakthrough. Still, detectives remained convinced that the puzzle could be solved. One Hamilton police officer remarked that the case had plenty of evidence at her fingertips, implying that the key to solving Vicki's murder was likely within the existing files, if only could be properly uncovered. Cold case status and re-examination efforts. For years, Vicki Sicurella's case sat as an unsolved homicide in Hamilton police files. By the 10 and 20-year anniversaries of the crime, the department periodically revisited the case, hoping new information or forensic techniques might crack it. In fact, 20 years after the murder, around 2011-2012, Hamilton police made headlines by announcing they had a prime suspect in sight. Detective Sergeant Ian Matthews, assigned to the cold case unit, reopened the investigation in 2012 and stated publicly that the case was very much solvable. He confirmed that a main suspect had been identified and was being closely investigated. Matthews did not name this individual, but he emphasized that the murder was not random and that evidence continued to point to someone in Vicki's circle. Hamilton police say they have a prime suspect in sight, one media report noted, reflecting a cautious optimism that after 2 decades, an arrest might finally be on the horizon. During this renewed probe, detectives retested forensic evidence with modern DNA technology. Any preserved samples, such as blood, skin cells, or other trace evidence from the knife in the crime scene, would have been analyzed in the hopes of finding a DNA profile match. Police also re-interviewed witnesses, persons of interest from 1991, trying to jog memories or uncover any previously withheld information. It was during this period that investigators privately honed in on the theory that the killer was indeed the man with whom Vicki had the alleged affair, or someone closely connected to that situation. However, building a prosecutable case proved difficult. Without sufficient physical evidence directly linking the suspect or a cooperative eyewitness, the team could not move forward with charges. Detective Sergeant Matthews himself hinted at frustration, saying essentially that they had everything but the single piece needed to clinching the case. Tragically, the cold case effort lost its momentum when Sergeant Ian Matthews died in late 2013. In a shocking development, Matthews died by suicide, unrelated to the Sicurella case, reportedly amid a separate internal investigation. His death was a blow to the Hamilton Police Service. Not only did they lose a veteran investigator, but the Sicurella case suddenly lost its champion. After Matthews' passing, Vicki's case stalled once again and returned to cold case status. By then, more than 2 decades had passed since the murder. While police quietly continued to keep an eye on the identified suspect, the trail for new leads had largely gone cold. As of today, no one's been arrested or charged for the murder of Vicki Sicurella. The prime suspect alluded to by police remains unnamed publicly, and authorities have not gathered enough evidence to proceed with the prosecution. Nevertheless, Hamilton police insist the case is still open. They periodically appeal to the public for information, holding out hope that someone might come forward with a crucial tip. Once called solvable, the case remains cold, one newspaper poignantly summarized. Investigators stress that loyalties and circumstances can change over the years. A witness who was unwilling to speak in 1991 might feel differently now, or a piece of evidence preserved for decades might suddenly match a person of interest if retested with new techniques. The Hamilton Police Service continues to encourage anyone with knowledge about Vicki's case to contact their homicide unit or Crime Stoppers. Up next, media coverage and public appeals over the years. Media coverage and public appeals over the years. Vicki Sicurella's murder was widely reported in Hamilton at the time it happened. The Hamilton Spectator and local TV news covered the basic facts. A young mother slain in her own home. A crime that sent ripples of fear and sorrow through the community. In the immediate aftermath, police gave few details to the press beyond confirming Vicki's identity and that her son was safe. As the investigation progressed, local media occasionally updated the public, especially when anniversaries approached or if there were new developments. One such update came around 2011, at the 20th anniversary, when Hamilton police revealed new hope in the case. Several media outlets ran stories, noting that police had a renewed focus and a strong suspect. 20 years after Victoria Sicurella was found stabbed to death in her kitchen, Hamilton police say they have a prime suspect in sight, reported one piece, capturing the sense of a potential breakthrough. Detective Sergeant Ian Matthews gave interviews in which he conveyed confidence about the evidence. He was quoted as saying the case was solvable and hinted that advancements in forensic science were being leveraged to finally catch the killer. These stories often included pleas to the public for any recollections from 1991 that might be useful. However, when no arrests materialized in the months and years following, the case slid back out of the headlines. In the decades since, Vicki's stories periodically resurfaced in the press as a notable Ontario cold case. For example, in 2019, Metroland Media, which publishes community newspapers across Ontario, included Vicki's case in a special true crime series called Behind the Crimes, Solved and Unsolved Cases in Ontario. An article titled Ontario Cold Case, Son Recalls Snowfall on the Day His Mum Was Murdered, was originally published on October 31, 2019, and later featured in the Hamilton Spectator and other outlets. In that feature, journalist Tara Lineman revisited the details of the murder and its aftermath, painting a picture of the tragic scene and noting how it was overcast that chilly afternoon of December 2, 1991. details that emphasize the passage of time and the still lingering questions. The piece highlighted the absence of justice and included input from police and family, keeping Vicki's memory alive in print. It was part of a concerted effort to shine a spotlight on unsolved murders in communities across the province. Most recently, in late 2023, the Hamilton Spectator ran an in-depth feature by reporter John Wells titled, "Who Killed Vicki Sicurella?" This article delved into the known facts and theories, revealing new personal insights. It described the crime scene as mysterious, noted the provocative detail of an affair with a married man, and reiterated that there was a suspect, but no charges laid. The Spectator article also brought Vicki's now adult son Brad into focus, describing how he coped through the years. In a poignant scene, Wells wrote of Brad carrying a framed photo of his mother, a symbol of his quest for remembrance and answers. He walked downtown carrying a bag with a framed picture inside, the narrative reads. The Spectator noted that the cold case still sparks tears and anger, but her son tries to do his mom proud in his own life. Such media coverage not only informs newer generations about the case, but also applies gentle pressure on the police and any witnesses to not let the case be forgotten. Impact on the community and ongoing efforts. The murder of Vicki Sicurella deeply affected her family and the Hamilton community. In 1991, news of a young mother stabbed to death in a quiet neighborhood was met with shock and anxiety. Parents in the area hugged their children a little tighter. Neighbors looked warily over their shoulders until police signaled that this appeared to be an isolated, targeted act. Once it was understood that Vicki likely knew her killer, the community's fear turned more into grief and compassion for her family. Vicki's friends and relatives were left not only to mourn her loss, but also to grapple with the agonizing uncertainty of an unsolved crime. Her son, only 7 at the time, had to grow up without his mother. Family members have described the lasting trauma. Brad especially carries the memory of that day. He later recalled the detail of seeing snowflakes falling the day his mother was killed, an image that has stayed with him as a somber reminder. Each year, when early December brings the first hints of winter in Hamilton, those who knew Vicki are reminded of the tragedy. In the years immediately following the murder, Vicki's family kept a low public profile, focusing on raising Brad and coping with their loss. There were quiet memorials. On the first anniversary, for instance, relatives lit a candle and prayed for justice. Over time, as Brad grew older, he came to understand more about what had happened to his mother. By all accounts, he has persevered. A 2023 article noted that he tries to do his mom proud each day. Now an adult, Brad has occasionally spoken about his mother's legacy, though he has generally stayed out of the spotlight. The Sicurella family, including Vicki's siblings and friends, continue to hope for closure. A Hamilton area family is still haunted following a stabbing death on a winter's day in 1991, wrote one Ontario newspaper, capturing how the case's longevity weighs on those left behind. They've expressed frustration that someone out there knows the truth, yet remains silent. Over the decades, they've cooperated fully with media retrospectives and police reinvestigations, believing that keeping Vicki's story alive is crucial. They participate in cold case articles and have never given up on the idea that one day the phone will ring but good news from the police. Community members and advocacy groups have also taken up Vicki's cause in subtle ways. The story is being included in local Crime Stoppers bulletins, shared on social media on anniversaries, urging anyone with information to come forward. Hamilton Police maintain a dedicated Unsolved Homicides page, where Vicki Sicurella's case is listed, reminding the public that her killer is not being brought to justice. This standing reminder keeps the case in the public eye. The impact of Vicki's murder in Hamilton is a lasting one. It serves as a stark reminder that even the city's safest neighborhoods are not immune to violence behind closed doors. Yet it has also rallied people with a sense of community determination, a hope that if they keep talking about Vicki and sharing her story, someone someday will reveal the missing piece of the puzzle. The case remains open and active in the sense that investigators will still act on credible information. For the sake of Vicki's memory and her family, Hamilton Police and the community at large have not forgotten. 3 decades have passed, but the file is still in the desk, awaiting the piece of evidence or witness testimony that will finally answer the painful question: who killed Vicki Sicurella? It's been more than 30 years since a quiet Hamilton neighborhood was shaken by the brutal murder of Vicki Sicurella. 3 decades. No trial. No justice. Just a grieving family, a son who lost his mother, and a killer who walked away, locking the door behind them. The evidence may still be in a box. The name may already be in the files. And the person who holds the missing piece, the one detail, the one truth, might be listening right now. If you know something, say something. No details too small. Call the Hamilton Police Service or leave an anonymous tip through Crime Stoppers. Because Vicki deserves more than silence. Her son deserves answers. And her killer deserves justice. Thank you for listening to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. If you found today's episode powerful, moving, or important, help us keep these cases alive. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you can, leave us a rating or a review. It helps others discover these stories and reminds the world these cases are not forgotten. To join the conversation, follow us on social media. We'd love to hear your theories, your thoughts, or your memories. Until next time, I'm Jay Nickel reminding you, every cold case is a story waiting to be solved. And sometimes, justice is just one voice away. Because every case deserves answers, and every victim deserves justice.